So the chemicals I focus on are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. And people have probably heard about these since I've been writing about them. They've gotten a lot more attention in the news, but I don't really agree with the way they're typically covered because the disease model of mental health is prevailing in our times in the academic and medical world, and that focuses people on the false belief that these chemicals are meant to flow all the time, just like your blood, and you have a level. But the way it works in animals is the chemicals only turn on in short spurts when it's appropriate, when you have that moment where you see an opportunity to meet a need, and then the chemical turns on and motivates you to move forward, take action to meet that need. And then the chemical stops and you don't get any more until you create another opportunity where it's appropriate. The 4 different happy chemicals create 4 different good feelings that motivate us to take action to meet 4 different survival needs. But this is not at all what we're thinking with our conscious brain. You're not thinking, when you have that joy of dopamine, you're not thinking, well, I'm meeting a survival need. And that's what sort of makes it hard for people to put the pieces together. So let's talk about them one at a time. Dopamine is often called joy. It's the excitement you feel when you anticipate a reward. But the way we anticipate a reward is with neural pathways built from our past rewards. So a newborn baby is hungry, doesn't know what food is, doesn't know what a mother is, but when it has that first taste of milk, a need is met, its hunger is relieved, and dopamine surges like, wow, this is great, get me more of this. So then as you go through life, you don't get that excited about food because your food need is met. Our ancestors, they had to forage for food all the time. So the system was designed to motivate them. They had to look for food or they'd starve to death. But because food is so easily available to us, we keep looking and looking for something else to stimulate the excitement of dopamine. And I don't condemn that. That's the way our system works. But we have to understand it and to say, okay, my brain is designed to be on a quest. What am I going to be on a quest for? And every one of us is biased by whatever triggered our dopamine when we were young. And so usually that's what we're on a quest for. And then our conscious verbal brain justifies it and says, I'm on this quest because it's the most important quest in the world. And every one of us can define our own quest as that. But then we could say, oh, wow, yeah, that's the pathway I learned when I was young. And that frees me to say, well, there are thousands of ways to be on a quest to stimulate my dopamine. Now, the important thing is that you get a little bit of dopamine when you take a little step closer to a reward. And each step closer gives you more dopamine. But when you finally get that thing you seek, like when a monkey finally gets the food that will meet its needs, dopamine stops because it has already done its job. And that's why no matter how you get excited over anything, it's not going to make you feel good forever. And that's so important to understand because otherwise, when the good feeling droops, either people blame that thing, oh, it's your fault, I thought you were so perfect, but you're not, or they blame, I must have a disorder. And I think it's so unfortunate that people just don't learn the way their dopamine system works. Oxytocin is the good feeling of social support, and it's often referred to as the love hormone or the cuddle chemical. Once again, it's represented in popular psychology in a way that I consider unhelpful, which is either hanging out with your pals gives you oxytocin, or hugging people. Now, hugging people, if you hug someone you don't like, it doesn't stimulate your oxytocin because your brain is looking for support. And if you think, oh, this person's not really going to support me, it doesn't give you oxytocin. But because there's been so much misrepresentation around this, I have started to really focus on what is the animal brain really looking for is support. When a gazelle is threatened by a lion, it runs to the herd because it wants protection from others. And maybe the lion now will eat someone else, but that gazelle survives. So it sounds crude, but this is how the animal brain works. I want a herd to protect me. And this is why people feel so unsafe when they're not in a herd, and then maybe do unsafe things in order to be in a herd. And it's also why once you're in a herd and you do things to follow the herd, but then they get on your nerves. Even though you're supposed to be told that the herd is a source of joy, they get on your nerves because in the animal world, either the herd runs when there's no actual predator and then you have to follow them, or the herd pees on the grass, and if you stick with them, you're eating grass that's been peed on, so you really want to go off to greener pasture that stimulates your dopamine. But then when you go off on your own, you feel like a predator is going to eat you and you go back to the herd to have oxytocin. So this is the difficult choice and trade-off that every one of us faces every minute of every day. And once again, if we know this, I found it was such a relief to say, oh wow, I'm normal, nothing's wrong with me, nothing's wrong with the world, this is how the brain works, but it doesn't take away the challenge of having to make that decision and balance those choices. Now, serotonin, this is the very complex one. I've already explained a little bit. So when a little mammal, little monkey, reaches for a banana and a bigger monkey is there, the bigger monkey will bite the little monkey and how dare you take my bananas? So that pain wires a little monkey to say, whoa, I'm not going to reach for bananas in the presence of a bigger monkey. So we have inherited this brain that is always making social comparisons. And when it sees that you're in the position of strength, your serotonin is released and it's like, whoa, I'm going to get the bananas, yay. And if I see that you're bigger than me, my cortisol is released and I'm like, whoa, I better find another source of bananas because I don't want to get bitten. You can see this easily in daily life, that people are always comparing themselves to others and finding an opportunity to put themselves in the one-up position. Now, there are nicer ways to do this and less nice ways to do this, and everybody gets annoyed when other people do it and they don't see how they're doing it themselves. The bottom line, like all the chemicals, is that anytime I get the one-up position, I just get it a little bit. Your brain only releases a little bit at a time, and then it goes down, and then you have to find a one-up position again, which is why people keep driving themselves crazy over whatever it is that stimulated their serotonin in their unique individual past. So each of us thinks, oh, well, it's wrong to look for the one-up position that way, but it's right to look for it that way. And so really helpful to notice our own patterns and then say, okay, I accept myself. I was wired to seek serotonin in that way when I was young, but there are thousands of ways to seek it. So I'm going to find a way through repetition to rewire myself to seek it in a new way. Now, endorphin. This is the chemical that people have heard most about because it was the first one that was discovered and then, alas, the most oversimplified. So you should know that endorphin is the body's natural opioid. So just like any other opioid, it works, but in nature, it only turns on when you're in real physical pain. It's your body's mechanism that says, you may have had a predator rip your flesh open, but you could still run for your life because endorphin masks pain for 15 minutes, and that gives you the opportunity to save yourself. So you have experienced this. If you've ever slipped and fallen and somebody says, are you okay? And you say, yeah, I'm fine. But then 15 minutes later, you say, wow, I'm really injured. So that's the body's natural mechanism. But we're not designed to injure ourselves to stimulate it. We're designed to only have it for emergencies and to seek the other happy chemicals, but not to seek endorphin. However, there has developed this cult of seeking endorphin in various ways. The one near me in California is exercising to the point of pain. Now, you've heard of runner's high. Runners don't get high every time they run, but only if they exercise to the point of pain. And if that's the only kind of neurochemical happiness you seek, then you have to keep inflicting more pain on yourself and eventually get injured, and then you still don't get dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. So that's why I feel so strongly about teaching people the natural job of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, and to seek them in healthy ways, but not to obsess over endorphin.